Hi guys, this is Brian. Welcome to Tech Bro. In today's session, we are going to learn about variables. A variable is a placeholder for a value, and that variable will behave in the same way as the value it holds. So guys, do you remember the algebra we used to do in school, where we used to do something like x equals to 32? Well, this looks almost the same as a variable, but the only difference is that a variable can store different types of data. For example, you can store a string like name, and also you can store a boolean. And another difference, for variables, you must define the data type. For example, this one, you can make it an integer, this one a string, and this one a boolean. So guys, let us first learn about the data types. For the data types, we have 8 primitive data types and 1 reference data type. So these data types which I have highlighted, I will try to elaborate more on them because we will be using them oftenly in our tutorials. So first we have the boolean. This is of size 1 bit. It's a primitive and it can only store true or false. We have the byte. A byte is of size 1 byte. It's a primitive and it can store values from -128 to 127. We have the short. This is of size 2 bytes. It's a primitive and it can store values from -32,768 up to 32,767. We have the integer. This is of size 4 bytes. It's a primitive and it can store values from -2 billion up to 2 billion. We have the long. This is of size 8 bytes. It's a primitive and it can store values from -9 quintillion up to 9 quintillion. We have the float, which is of size 4 bytes. It's a primitive and it can store a fraction or a decimal, which is up to 6 to 7 digits. And when initializing a float, you must include this f at the last to tell our compiler that this is a float. And also, we do the same thing when we are initializing a long. We include the L at the back, at the end, to tell our compiler that this is a long. Let's proceed to a double. The double is of size 8 bytes. It's a primitive and it can store decimals or fractions up to 15 digits. So we have the character. This is of size 2 bytes. It's a primitive and it can store a single character, letter, or ASCII value. For example, K. Or for example, the art, which is used in emails. So when you are creating a character, you must put it in single quotes to tell our compiler that this is a character. And lastly, we have the string, which is a reference data type. So the size of a string varies because strings are user defined. So the size vary. So a string can store a sequence, like it can store a sequence of characters, for example, a name or a sentence. So guys, let us look at the differences between primitive data types and reference data types. Primitive data types, there are only 8, as we have seen them above, which is not the case with reference data types. For reference data types, they are unlimited because they are user-defined. Primitive data types, they store data. And reference data types, they store address or memory location. Primitive data types, they can only hold one value, which is not the case with reference data types. Primitive data types, they use less memory compared to reference data types. And lastly, primitive data types, they are fast compared to reference data types. So let's try to create variables in our program and we see. Already we had created these variables, but I'm going to go back and I take you through the step-by-step of on how to create variables. When we are creating variables, we can create variables in 2 steps. The first step is called declaration. And the second step is called assigning. Assignment or assigning a value. So during declaration, this is where when we define the data type of the variable. For example, we can define an integer like int x. Then after declaring a variable, sorry, then we have to assign it a value. For example, we can say x equals to 32. So if we print out x, system.out, if we print, so if we run our program, we'll be able to see that x is equivalent to 32. So that means that the variable is behaving the same way like the value it is holding. So if you check here, it is equals to 32. So guys, there is also a shorthand on how we can define or how we can create a variable, which is called initialization. Initialization. During initialization, we declare and assign a value to the variable at the same time. For example, I can do this like int x equals to 32. That means that I have declared and initialized in only one line. So when I run my program, it will print the same output. So it will give me the same output because what I've done is the same. So when you check here, it is showing that it is printing 32. So guys, there is another thing which is important when it comes to variables. When we are printing this variable, we printed x, not x in quotes. If you print x in quotes, this will be a string. You will be referring to x as a string, not x as the variable you created. So when you print this out, it will print x because it's x a string, not a variable. So let us try to run the project and we see the outcome. So when you run this project, you see that the outcome will be x, which is x a string, not x a variable. If it was the variable, it was going to be 32. So another thing we need to talk about is concatenation or string concatenation, whereby you can print something like uh, value of x is, so concatenation, this is the plus sign, which we will use to add a string to our variable during printing. For example, I can add x, I can print out this like this. If I run my program, we'll be able to see that we have printed the string and then we have printed our variable too. So you can see here the value of x is 32. That means we have concatenated a string to our variable. So that is called string concatenation. That is called concatenation in Java. All right, guys, I think we should talk about also floats. For example, if we are to create a float, we can create it like, let me just change this one. I will remove this because we are already done with it. So we can make this one a float. Float x equals to 32.0f. So we can run it and see the output. So it will give you the output with a decimal value. If we wanted to make this a long, we will just change this to long and include L at the last, like this. Oh, hold on, we didn't have to include the decimal point because a long is not a decimal, it does not include decimal points. So if we are to create a long variable, we would create it like that. So you see that our value is, the value of x is 32. Also another thing, let us create a boolean. Can make this a boolean. Make this true. and we run our project and see. So guys, you see here we have our output. The value of x is true. So guys, that is how we create variables in Java. So I think you can go on to create other variables like the string and other variables like the character. For example, if we were to create a string, we have to use a capital S. We make x a string, and we make this to let me make it hello. Let's take row. If we print this to console, it will show the output that it's a string. It will show you the value of x is hello tech bro. So the value of x is hello tech bro. So guys, that is how we create variables in Java. So hope we are on the same line. We meet in the next session. Bye bye.